Good morning. It's time for Yoga with Jenny. And today we're continuing on with opening sequences. This is for the shoulders, kind of balances out, and really it just adds to what we did the other day with opening up the hips. It's all one piece. This effort to bring ourselves into more length, kind of unfurl our spines and lift ourselves nice and tall. So this is all has to do with posture. We're going to start out using a foam roller. If you don't have a roller, you can accomplish the same type of release for muscles just by putting some pressure back into something, but maybe it's a softer surface like a rolled up towel or blanket. Or even if you have a yoga bolster, you could use that too. I would use the skinny yoga bolster if you have like a small one. You can see the purple one behind me. But and then when we're using the roller to slide, if you just keep your hand on the floor. So we're going to be talking a lot about the muscles in the upper back and around the shoulder girdle that stabilize the scapula and mobilize the scapula as well. So this area in the back is often the part that is kind of locked down or tightened when we have that rounded hunched shoulder forward head posture, this middle of the back. So we're going to try to release some of those muscles and then get them strong and moving. Okay, here we go. I have one friend with me. Can you go to your crate? The other friend is in a crate. So we're going to start on your side with, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's work with the muscles and wake them up a little bit. So I'm going to lean back. It's kind of starting out at my brow line. And I'm just going to hold onto my head with my hands just to support. I'm not in a crunch, and I'm not leaning too far back. Lift up your bottom, and then just simply roll. Just a couple minutes ago, I was reading a jam recipe, so it reminds me of that. The foam roller is a bit of a blunt instrument. It's long, and it's not as small as some of the typical muscular knots that we get, or even trigger points, but it does it really puts pressure into muscles, and if they're really tight, unwilling to move, just kind of locked down and getting really, not as fluid, there's not a lot of fluid in there, and fluidity, it really helps to macerate the muscles, just like we do with fruit before we make jam. So we're moving those muscles, just kind of pushing into them. If you do find like a little tight spot that you kind of jump over, you can stay there and breathe, or kind of go back and forth a little bit. Slow it down, stay. And so I do about 15 to 20 seconds, and then I stop and I pause. And the second part is literally using the pressure of the foam roller up into those muscles. Then we're going to lean back into that pressure. So it might look like I'm doing kind of a curl, like crunches, but all I'm doing is basically going back into it without really letting my ribs flare and arching my upper back, my lower back, but I'm trying to bend right where the roller is touching me, and then just simply release upward. Pulse and release. And you'll see that I stop my head from going too much into a crunch motion. I just come back up where I started. And then you go, one vertebra up, and you do the same little pulsing motion. Hold with two hands now. And then incrementally work your way up your spine. Through the thoracic spine, through the space between the scapula, up to the top of the scapula. Sometimes it just rolls right out from under you, and then you know it's time to be done. We're going to end by rolling it under the neck and letting it push into those upper trapezius muscles, those neck muscles that tend to be muscles that grab a hold, right, when we our forward head that they can't engage. And I like to do our windshield wiper twist right here. And it never ceases to amaze me how when you turn your hips, you feel a difference in your neck. I know it sounds elementary, it sounds very essential or beginner, but we're all connected, all parts of us. Continue rolling all the way off to one side. And here's where I wanted to start. So if you're working with a blanket, this it won't really work for this next part. What you'll just do is instead of having your hand on the roller, you'll just put your hand on the floor and just simply slide. The roller provides that sliding motion to the body that helps assist feeling it in your body. So as I push the roller forward with my palm, I'm going to try to feel, I'm going to use my other hand as a little assist here, feel the scapula, feel it moving away from the spine, and then I'm going to try to feel that scapula, that shoulder blade moving in towards the spine. Now not creeping up, but not necessarily shoving it down, just trying to feel what does inward towards the spine mean, and what is that gliding open feel like. And again, that is again about balance. When our shoulders are so rounded forward, many of us, we can't get our shoulders to pull back at all. So number one, starting with that maceration on the foam roller, and then trying to feel. Can you feel some of that motion as you reach forward? Right? You might think, I don't want to go more forward. I'm already rounded, but I want you to be able to move there and then move back out of it. So a happy, healthy muscle is one that is toned, but that can also stretch and move, and that's not just holding tension. So now I'm going to move that shoulder back. That shoulder blade comes back to the spine before I do a twist. So I think a lot of times in traditional yoga twists, we're directed to open our chest. We're directed to get our hand to the floor no matter what. This is about holding your lower back and then feeling that stretching sensation in the front. But sometimes we can't get the front to stretch. It's so tight because the back isn't moving. So now hopefully that back part, the scapula, is moving. And I just want you to open up as far as you can go, but no further. So you don't want to rush your hand to the ground. You really want, as the yoga term goes, opening in the shoulder. And then you breathe. And that's all we do. We don't really try to push into a deeper stretch, but just feeling how the breath, which moves your belly, your ribs, your back, your front, your sides, your chest, and your neck and head and shoulders. If you find yourself in the midst of this stretch, I'll reveal my knees, and one knee has slid. This is about 2 inches further back than this one. That's when you know you're starting to cheat. You're starting to move your hips in order to get your arm to the floor. And I want your shoulder to be moving to get your arm to the floor. So that requires the pectoral muscles to stretch. It requires your back muscles to have that flexibility to twist. We're going to come up to our other side. So I began with just pushing and pulling. And as I roll the roller, I'm just trying to become aware of my back and my shoulder blade and my shoulder, and kind of how it's related to the front of my body, how it feels when I do one motion versus the other. Now sometimes I feel a little bit more sensitive to the scapular motion if I take my hand up at a slight angle. It's not overhead, right, but it's kind of up at a 45-degree angle. And that helps there. I can feel the scapular tip right under my fingertips. That helps because the shoulder blade actually does a little kind of turning and tipping into the armpit as we reach. So that's helping feel a little more movement there. And if you feel that just coming upward, you know, your shoulder is just creeping up, I just did a very subtle adjustment of my hand on the roller, turning my palm up, my shoulder open in the top. So this is external rotation. So if you lead with your pinky finger and push the pinky finger side into the roller as you pull back, even as you reach, I feel it a little bit more coming from down in here rather than thumb. And then as you pull back, that's when you're going to begin to twist open. And we come into the twist and just breathe. Not necessarily pushing the hand down or trying to get anywhere. So just like I was doing on the roller, if you look at my hand, my palm is open. So that's that rotation in the shoulder socket, the rotator cuff, right? If I turn and I try to get my thumb down to the floor, you can see that the front part of my shoulder is still actually closing in, right? It's turning forward. So I want that open by turning my palm up. The eye of the elbow turns up and my chest turns open. And then come back around. Yeah, sometimes it seems like that direction seems to have nothing to do with anything else. It's way on the end of your body. What should turning your palms do? But so you can isolate it from your forearm because of those two bones. But most of the time when we turn, it kind of helps to affect the upper arm bone and how it sits in the socket. And that's really going to make a difference in what muscles you're strengthening. Okay, on to hands and knees. And we just go into our traditional, well-known, well-loved cat stretch first. What is it like to feel your back tilting and rounding? And then coming in the other direction, so you could stop in neutral, flat back, or you could arch your back, go beyond neutral, and then round, and arching. There's my neutral line. I'm stopping with that feeling of my neck being long in the back, my head elevated to the height of the spine, but not higher. Gaze down. And we're going to make that cat motion smaller. So the shoulders were moving during cat, but now we're just going to move the shoulders. So this is that scapular motion that we practiced on our sides, but now we're doing it symmetrically. I think of drooping down a little bit, and this is the breastbone, the chest, drooping, and that allows the scapula to move. And then as you push the heel of the hands into the floor, those scapula are going to widen, they're going to glide apart. Sink without everything sinking and relaxing, and then exhale to push without everything rounding. Right? So it's a very small range of motion where you can still feel those shoulder blades moving in your back. Now again, this muscle can be a bit of a bully, the top of the shoulder. So often when we try to go into that scapular widening, the shoulders love to come up and curl forward, which is what we're trying to avoid. We're trying to come away from that. So the widening is important. It's again important that it come from underneath the scapula. That's that serratus anterior, this muscle that kind of wraps and holds the shoulder blades steady on our body and holds our, whatever we're holding up, whether it's just our body weight or if it's one hand, holding everything up on one hand, very hard. So I find that what helps a little bit for me to get out of bringing my shoulders up is to go wider with my hands. And as I push, I start to push more with my pinky finger. So it's the same kind of principle that I used on the roller. I'm pushing with my pinky finger side of my hand so that I can feel right here, instead of just feeling my neck. So it's an inhale to sink down, scapula squeeze, exhale to push up. And people call these scapular push-ups for a reason, so you can make this harder by weight bearing more, right? In terms of, weight bearing in a more difficult position, let's say. So quadruped is evenly distributed. If you take your knees further back and you bring your hips into a real neutral plank, right? Then you're having to stabilize your spine, your whole entire spine, as you move through those scap push-ups. So this really, for me, I feel it a lot more in my abdominals. I have to lift my ribs up, a lot more conscious of where my tailbone is in relation to my ribs, right? So not piking up, not arching that lumbar spine, but not drooping. If you want to go all the way into a full plank, give that a try. And then we're going to rest. We're going to come to a seat. So a lot of what we're talking about is movement, the widening of the scapula. I find a lot of times we hear in postural cueing, we hear in our yoga classes, our fitness classes, pull your shoulders back, pull them down, right? Pull them down, pull them down. And so we don't get that sense of movement, especially not that widening of the scapula. So pulling them together is great for, strengthening when we want to pull ourselves back, or when we're pulling weight back, as in a row. But when we're reaching for something, we need to have that ability to move, that widening. So we're going to go into eagle arms, bringing your arms across. Try to cross the elbows. And then you can embrace your scapula, embrace yourself, and feel how just in this cross position, those scapula are meant to be widening. So we're meant to be able to feel some sense of movement and opening in our back. You can go for the full Monty here if you want to lift your elbows up. Your hands, forearms up first. And then again, thinking about that scapular motion, right? It often doesn't just go out away from the spine and in, that's pretty small, but it also starts to swing kind of out toward the armpit. So when we take our elbows into eagle arms a little deeper, we're going to actually reach them up, but without shrugging. So you're trying to reach the elbows up from here, from your scapular swinging motion. And then for many of our shoulders and upper back, if that's tight, the lower back is like, oh, hey, I can do that. I can take my arms up. So pulling front ribs in, pulling your core in as you attempt to lift. Relax and go the other way. this ability to move the scapula apart and use the muscles underneath that bra line, that serratus anterior, is one of the big ones. Of course, our chest is involved in pushing motion, but getting that serratus anterior on board is what really helps to kind of preserve the back alignment, right? So pushing is that practical skill. We need to push ourselves up, right? Push ourselves off the floor, push ourselves out of bed in the morning. I always like to break it down to why we need these motions, right? We don't just pull things, we also push things away or reach for things. Even holding a steering wheel, there's a lot of reaching forward in our daily life. And if we're doing that from our shoulders being up, chances are good it's not going to feel great. If we're doing it by gripping down in the front and pushing our shoulders down, it's also not going to end well, right, for our shoulders. Let's go ahead and come back up. Oh, yes. So we're going to take our scapular push-ups into chaturanga push-ups. So number one, my thing that I like to tell students is everybody's elbows have been through different things. I think I had one year where I had 4 different students who had broken their forearms or their elbows. It was something down in here. And so when each of them did push-ups, their angle of the elbow looked slightly different from each other, right? Slightly different from other people. So if you have in your mind, I've got to get my elbow right, scraping my body, your body may not be able to do that without kind of compensating with this rounded forward posture in the shoulder and the head, or one other muscle taking over. Again, there's that pesky upper trapezius. And the rotator cuff will pay the price. So what I want to say is just let go of this idea of a perfect angle with the elbows. Let go of this idea that they have to scrape your body to do chaturanga. So maybe a little bit narrower or a little bit angled down or back instead of out to the sides of the room or up, right? So as I come into a again, I'm going to do this on my knees, but you could be on your toes. What I'm going to think is my elbows are just going to go back a little bit at an angle. They're not going to go right beside my body if I can't do that safely. And I'm going to inhale or exhale, but feel that scapular motion and feel my elbows bend without losing my back position. So anytime you start to feel that kind of drooping in the rib cage and the mid back, you've gone too low for your strength. And come all the way up every time. So I practice coming up. Maybe that's neutral, but I practice pushing all the way up through with that serratus anterior. And then come back to a rest. Good. One more strengthener before we move into more release work. We're going to come down into goalpost cobra. So I've got my arms, elbows bent in a goalpost position. And we're going to be doing teeny little, in essence, scapular push-ups, but with our chest above the mat. So again, it's kind of deepening the, changing the work, making it harder by changing the angle of your body. So I'm going to lift my chest, long back of the neck, so no craning upward, eyes of the mat. Baby cobra. And in baby cobra, instead of thinking, okay, I've got to get my elbows off the mat, so again, kind of getting rid of that mindset of moving your arms, I want you to move your scapula, and then try to elevate your arms off the mat. So my scapula are coming towards the spine, and then I'm elevating my arms. And then the motion is coming from the scapula. So we're just going to do these little teeny tiny squeezes. Now, what I notice for most of my students is when we're given this action, in the translation, we either do elbows pulling back toward the ribs, kind of like this, kind of like pulling motion, or we think of elbows squeezing back. And when we do that kind of rowing motion, can you see how my shoulder is dipping way below my elbow? So that's again reinforcing poor posture pattern. So I want you to, if you're lifting your elbow, I want you to move your shoulder blade and shoulder just as quickly. So they're keeping pace. So one way you can think of it is move your elbows less or move your shoulders more. And it's small. Come back down. And then it's time to rest in child's pose. I'm just sharing with you guys that I'm loving this modification. Having something to hug in my child's pose kind of helps me to lengthen out, speaking of flexibility and release work for my area of my back that's super tight. Press yourself back up. Good. And then where we're going for a release is a baby back bend over one of these surfaces. Now you might be able to work your way up to bending back over that roller. It's kind of like where we began, but the roller is really big. So I personally, I'm a big fan of a yoga blanket rolled into a really long worm. And the great thing about a blanket is you could change the size. You could unroll a little bit of it if it just feels like too much for your back. I also like a skinny yoga bolster. The big one just may be too fat for your back, right? It will cover too much of your back and then you won't be able to get your shoulders comfortably to the floor. So in this position, I'm gonna sit on the mat in front of it and lower my bra line onto it and then lower my head and shoulders back to the floor. Oh yeah, so you can see I'm kind of in the flip side of what I was just doing. I was in that goalpost position with my arms and I was trying to work on my upper back strengthening, bringing my scapula back. Now, as I mentioned with the roller, if that area for our back is really tight, probably down lower is going to start to compensate. You can see my ribs really pushing forward and up, and there's a big arch in my back. Now I'm not going to flatten my back, but I'm going to take a couple deep breaths and try to work on every last drop leaving. And you can see how my ribs are just gently coming in a little bit. So here's what I'm not doing, is tucking my bottom to flatten my back. Instead, I'm kind of resolving my back a little bit lower by bringing my core in. My shoulders, in the meantime, stay back, stay open. The scapula stay, just gently on the mat, maybe a little bit closer to the spine, but not squeezing. If you're comfortable with bent knees, stay with that. You can also lengthen your legs. When you're ready, you soften your knees, gather them closer to you, roll off to one side. And I roll so that I lie in a completely kind of rounded up position. So reversing the position for those back muscles. And then pressing on up. May we be happy, may we be healthy, may we be more at peace and live with more ease in our body, mind, and our heart. My hope is that you're feeling a little bit more openness in the front, a little bit more strength and awareness in the back of your body to set you up for a nice, tall, lifted posture today. Namaste. Take care, friends. Hope to see you again.